We never expected nothing like this. Never.
What in the hell is going on here?
Oh, look at this.
Oh, wow.
Going in right now.
We're going to run a camera in Aladdin's cave.
Oh my God, look at that.
Terry Matheson wasn't supposed to find anything. He'd been brought in as a technical consultant, not a treasure hunter, not a believer, not someone with a theory to prove. His job was to run ground-penetrating radar sweeps across sections of Oak Island that previous surveys had already covered, and confirm what everyone assumed was already known about the subsurface geology. Routine work. Professional, detached, definitive. Except the readings he got back didn't match the geological profile anyone expected. They didn't match the previous survey data, and they didn't match anything Terry had seen in 30 years of subsurface detection work across 4 continents. What the equipment was showing him were 3 distinct enclosed spaces, not geological anomalies, not equipment artifacts, not interference from the island's notoriously complex water table. 3 chambers, deliberately constructed, positioned in a triangular formation at depths ranging from 60 to 110 feet, oriented in a pattern that made no geological sense and every engineered sense. Terry ran the sweeps 4 more times, different angles, different frequencies, different times of day to account for moisture variables in the soil. Every single sweep returned the same result: 3 chambers. Beneath Oak Island, waiting. Terry Matheson didn't come to Oak Island looking for the answer to a 227-year mystery, but the equipment doesn't care what you're looking for. It shows you what's there. Hit like and subscribe, because what Terry's detection data revealed beneath Oak Island, and what 3 chambers means for everything researchers thought they understood about the money pit, is a discovery that rewrites the map. The detector, most people who get involved with Oak Island come through the same door: curiosity about the treasure, fascination with the mystery, a belief that they have the angle nobody else has tried. Terry Matheson came through a completely different door. He came through competence. Terry built his career in subsurface detection for industrial and archaeological applications. Pipeline surveys, foundation assessments, archaeological site evaluation before construction projects disturb potentially significant ground. He worked on sites in the Middle East, where ground-penetrating radar had identified buried structures that changed the archaeological record. He'd surveyed locations in South America where pre-Columbian engineering had created underground systems that surface archaeology had completely missed for generations. His professional reputation rested on one thing: accuracy. In his field, being wrong isn't an embarrassment. It's a liability. Clients make million-dollar decisions based on subsurface detection data. Construction projects get halted or redirected. Archaeological digs get funded or defunded. The data has to be right. I've walked away from projects when conditions made reliable data impossible, Terry explained to the team that brought him to Oak Island. I won't give you a clean reading if the conditions produce noise. I'll tell you the data is inconclusive and we need to try again. That reputation for refusing to oversell data was exactly why he was brought to Oak Island. Previous subsurface surveys of the island had produced contradictory results. Different teams using similar equipment had gotten readings that didn't align, creating a confusing picture that fueled debates about what was actually beneath the surface. The goal wasn't to find treasure. The goal was to produce reliable subsurface mapping that could finally settle what the island's geology actually looked like. Baseline data for planning future operations rather than a treasure hunt. Terry understood that framing. He also understood that producing reliable data on Oak Island was going to be technically challenging in ways that explained why previous surveys had been inconsistent. Oak Island is a nightmare for subsurface detection, Terry said bluntly during the initial site assessment. The water table is complex. There's significant ferrous material in the soil from previous excavation operations over 2 centuries. There are flood channels throughout the subsurface that create confusing reflectance patterns, and the previous excavations have disturbed the geology in ways that generate noise. Getting clean data here is hard. He spent 2 full days calibrating his equipment specifically for Oak Island's conditions before running a single survey sweep, adjusting frequencies to minimize water table interference, mapping the known subsurface disturbances from previous excavations so their signatures could be identified and filtered, establishing baseline readings from areas of the island known to be geologically undisturbed. Terry wasn't going to get fooled by Oak Island's notorious ability to produce misleading readings. He was going to get it right. What he got was more than right. It was extraordinary. The survey plan Terry designed covered sections of Oak Island that had been mapped before, and several sections that had never received systematic subsurface assessment. His approach worked in grids, methodical, overlapping passes that built up a 3-dimensional picture of what lay beneath the surface, rather than isolated readings that could be misinterpreted. Think of it like building a CT scan of the island's subsurface, rather than taking individual X-rays. The first 2 days of sweeping produced exactly what Terry expected. Normal geological variation, signatures consistent with the island's known geology, bedrock at expected depths, water table movement through established channels, disturbance patterns consistent with documented locations of previous excavation work. Day 2, I had a clean baseline, Terry noted in his field documentation. I knew what normal looked like for this island. That's critical, because you can't identify abnormal until you know normal. The anomaly appeared on day 3. Terry was sweeping a section of the island approximately 200 feet northeast of the primary money pit location, ground that had been considered peripheral to the main treasure site and had received limited subsurface investigation as a result. His equipment registered a reflectance pattern that didn't match the established baseline. He almost flagged it as equipment interference and moved on. The pattern was unusual enough that interference was the reasonable first assumption, but he ran the baseline check protocols he'd established for exactly this situation. The interference markers weren't there. The pattern was real. Terry set a marker and continued the survey, completing the planned grid before returning to investigate the anomaly more closely. Mixing initial discovery excitement with ongoing systematic work is how you miss things. He'd learned that lesson on a site in Jordan, where rushing to investigate an anomaly had led his team to miss 3 additional structures that a completed systematic survey would have found. The completed grid, when processed and visualized, showed not 1 anomaly, but 3, positioned in a rough triangle. 2 of the chambers at similar depths, in the 60 to 75-foot range. The third deeper, approximately 100 to 110 feet, directly beneath the triangle formed by the other 2. Terry stared at the visualization for a long time without speaking. Then he said to his assistant, "Run it again. Different frequency. Don't tell me what I just found. Just run the sweep and show me the output." The second sweep, run blind by his assistant who hadn't been shown the first results, produced the same 3 anomalies in the same positions. The chambers. 3 chambers beneath Oak Island. What does that actually mean? And why does it change everything researchers thought they understood? For 227 years, Oak Island investigation has operated on a single vault assumption. The Money Pit, the original excavation site, contained 1 primary deposit at depth. The flood tunnels were designed to protect that 1 primary vault. All of the historical theories about what's buried there assumed a single treasure buried in a single location. Terry's detection data suggests something fundamentally more complex. 3 chambers, positioned in a triangular formation, implies deliberate engineering design rather than a simple burial. You don't accidentally create 3 separate enclosed underground spaces in a geometric arrangement. That pattern is planned. When I see geometric positioning in subsurface structures, it tells me something about the builders, Terry explained, walking through the data with the operations team. Random deposits don't form triangles. Natural geological formations don't form triangles. Engineered systems designed by people with a plan form triangles. The depth variation adds another layer of significance. The 2 upper chambers at 60 to 75 feet are above traditional flood tunnel depth, potentially accessible without triggering the water defense system that has defeated excavation attempts for over 2 centuries. The 3rd chamber, at 100 to 110 feet, sits at or below flood tunnel depth, consistent with where primary vault contents have always been theorized to rest. What Terry was looking at might be a deliberate 3-part system. Upper chambers that could serve as decoys, secondary deposits, or structural supports for the deeper primary chamber. A design philosophy built on redundancy and misdirection. Hide the most valuable contents at the greatest depth, but create a system that would send searchers chasing the wrong targets. 2 centuries of people have been focused entirely on the money pit location, Terry noted. If this detection data is accurate, they've been focused on the right island but potentially the wrong spot. Or, more precisely, they've been focused on one part of a 3-part system without knowing the other 2 parts existed. The implications for the historical understanding of what's buried on Oak Island are significant. A 3-chamber system requires more resources to build than a single vault. More people, more time, more sophisticated engineering, and more valuable contents to justify that additional investment. Whoever buried something on Oak Island didn't just bury something, they built a system. The analysis. Terry's raw detection data was compelling, but Terry Matheson didn't build his professional reputation on compelling raw data. He built it on verified conclusions. Before he'd say anything publicly, he needed independent verification and expert analysis that could either confirm his interpretation or identify what he might be missing. The verification process started with the data itself. Terry shared his raw survey files, not his interpretation, just the data, with 2 independent subsurface detection specialists. His instructions were specific. Analyze the data, tell me what you see. Don't look at my notes until you've formed your own conclusions. Both specialists identified the same 3 anomalies independently. One described them as consistent with void spaces of engineered dimensions. The other was more cautious, noting the anomalies were structurally inconsistent with natural geological formation, but requiring ground truth verification before definitive interpretation. Neither could identify an alternative explanation for the pattern. Terry then worked with an engineering archaeologist who specialized in historical construction methods, specifically underground engineering from the 17th and 18th centuries, the period most commonly associated with Oak Island's construction. The dimensional signatures are consistent with construction techniques from the period, the archaeologist concluded after analyzing Terry's data. The chamber dimensions, roughly 15 by 20 feet for the upper 2 chambers, larger for the lower, are consistent with the structural capabilities of late colonial-era engineering, and the triangular positioning is consistent with architectural principles that were understood and applied during that period for underground construction. The structural analysis deepened when Terry brought in a geotechnical engineer to assess whether the chambers, if real, could have maintained structural integrity for the 240-plus years they'd apparently been in place. Given the bedrock composition in that section of the island, yes, the engineer confirmed. The subsurface geology at those depths would provide sufficient structural support for chambers of those dimensions if they were properly constructed with period-appropriate techniques. The bedrock is essentially load-bearing at that depth. Properly built chambers would last indefinitely. Every expert consultation added a layer of confirmation, rather than raising a new reason for doubt. That accumulation, not any single expert's opinion, but the pattern of consistent conclusions from independent analysts, was what shifted Terry's assessment from anomaly requiring investigation to strong evidence of constructed underground chambers. The pattern. The three-chamber configuration Terry detected isn't just significant for what it suggests about Oak Island specifically. It fits a pattern of historical underground engineering that changes how researchers should be thinking about the site. Triangular chamber arrangements appear in historical underground construction across multiple cultures and time periods, not because different cultures copied each other, but because triangular structural distribution solves specific engineering problems in underground construction. 3 support points are more stable than 2. The triangular arrangement distributes load more evenly than linear positioning. Engineers working in different eras independently arrived at similar solutions to the same structural challenges. When Terry showed the chamber configuration to a specialist in 18th century military engineering, the period most historically associated with Oak Island's construction, the response was immediate recognition. This looks like a modified version of what British military engineers called a distributed vault system, the specialist explained. When securing significant assets for long-term storage, British military doctrine from the 1760s through the 1790s sometimes called for distributing contents across multiple chambers rather than concentrating everything in a single vault. The reasoning was practical. If one chamber was compromised, the others remained secure. This detail, British military engineering doctrine calling specifically for distributed chamber systems during exactly the period Oak Island's construction is most likely to have occurred, connected Terry's detection data to the historical record in a way that wasn't coincidental. You don't plan a 3-chamber system unless you have enough contents to distribute across 3 chambers, Terry noted. This isn't a design for hiding a small deposit. This is infrastructure for securing a significant quantity of material across redundant storage locations. The Money Pit, the location that has consumed 2 centuries of searching, may have been just one element of a 3-part system, and searchers who focused exclusively on the Money Pit may have been, all along, looking at 1/3 of the picture. The challenge. Knowing 3 chambers exist beneath Oak Island and actually accessing them are 2 different problems entirely. Terry was clear about the limitations of his detection data. Ground-penetrating radar and the electromagnetic detection methods he employed are powerful tools for identifying subsurface anomalies and characterizing their general dimensions. They are not tools for determining with certainty what's inside those anomalies. I can tell you with high confidence that 3 enclosed void spaces exist in the positions I've identified, Terry said. I can tell you their approximate dimensions and depths. I can tell you they're inconsistent with natural geological formation. What I cannot tell you is what's inside them, or even whether they're empty or filled. Chambers can be empty. A system built for storing something doesn't guarantee that something is still there. The builders might have removed the contents. Previous searchers who stumbled onto one of the chambers without understanding what they'd found might have inadvertently accessed and emptied it. The chambers could have been decoys from the beginning, elaborate empty spaces designed to waste the time of anyone who found them. But the engineering investment required to build 3 chambers in the configuration Terry detected argues strongly against the empty decoy interpretation. You don't build this kind of system as misdirection. The resources required are too significant, You build it to protect something worth protecting. In my experience with historical sites, Terry said carefully, the relationship between engineering investment and contents is generally proportional. You don't build a bank vault to store nothing. The sophistication of what we're looking at under Oak Island is consistent with protecting something of genuine significance. The access question is genuinely complex. The two upper chambers, at 60 to 75 feet, are theoretically accessible without triggering the flood tunnel defense that has defeated excavation at greater depths. Reaching them would require precision drilling to avoid disturbing the chamber's structural integrity and sophisticated extraction protocols to ensure contents, if present, are recovered rather than damaged. The lower chamber, at 100 to 110 feet, presents the familiar Oak Island challenge of flood tunnel depth. But Terry's detection data offered something new: precise horizontal positioning of the chamber that differs from the money pit location. An approach targeting the lower chamber's actual position rather than the money pit location might allow access through ground that isn't connected to the flood tunnel network. The question isn't just whether the chambers are accessible, Terry noted. The question is whether they're accessible at their actual locations, which are not the same as where 2 centuries of searches have been focused. The implications. Terry Matheson's detection data arrived at a moment when Oak Island research had reached something of an inflection point. Decades of investigation, including years of well-funded, well-documented searching, had produced significant artifacts and tantalizing evidence without producing the definitive discovery that would resolve the fundamental question. Fragments, hints, circumstantial confirmation that something significant had happened on this island, without confirmation of what that something was. The 3-chamber detection changes the operational picture entirely. For the first time, researchers have specific, technology-verified targets. Not a general area of the island, not a theoretical depth. Specific horizontal positions and specific depth ranges for 3 distinct structures that can be approached with precision tools rather than broad excavation. The history of Oak Island searching has been defined by not knowing exactly what you're looking for or precisely where it is, Terry observed. You knew the general area, you knew the general depth, but the flood system punished every broad approach. What we have now are precise coordinates for specific targets. That's operationally transformative. The precision matters because the flood tunnel system's effectiveness depends on triggering it. Dig broadly in the flood zone, and you hit the tunnels and the water rushes in. But surgical access, precisely targeted at specific positions that may exist outside the flood tunnel network's reach, changes the equation. For historians and archaeologists, the 3-chamber configuration provides new questions to research. If British military engineers built a distributed vault system on Oak Island, which the chamber configuration suggests, what documentation might exist in British archives about the construction? Military engineering projects of that scale required planning, resources, and personnel that would have left paper trails. Trails that might now be worth searching with the specific configuration in mind. We know what we're looking for in the archives now, one historian noted after reviewing Terry's findings. A 3-chamber distributed vault system built by military engineers in the late 18th century is a specific enough construction that it should have left specific documentation. We haven't found that documentation because we weren't looking for it. Now we are. For the broader world of historical mystery research, Terry's discovery demonstrates something important. Technology applied with discipline and methodology can reveal what centuries of enthusiasm and effort could not. The chambers were always there. They were detectable with equipment that has existed for decades.